What happens when a seemingly perfect marriage is built on secrets? Claire and Michael had crafted a life together that resembled a fairy tale. Married for 15 years, they lived in a charming suburban home with their 2 children, Emma and Jake. Claire managed the household and nurtured the kids, while Michael dedicated himself to his demanding architecture career. To the outside world, they epitomized the ideal couple, successful, loving, and utterly devoted to family. Claire's friends marveled at her good fortune to have a husband like Michael, who was attentive in public and always ready to lend a hand. However, beneath this polished surface, cracks were forming in their relationship. Michael's career increasingly consumed his time and energy. Long hours at the office turned into late nights and weekends, spent poring over blueprints or attending client meetings. "It's just for now," he would reassure Claire whenever she expressed concern over his vanishing presence. "Once this project is finished, things will go back to normal." But that normalcy never materialized. Claire found herself eating dinner alone more often, the empty chair at the table a stark reminder of their growing disconnection. Even when Michael was home, he seemed distant, lost in his phone or laptop. "Do you even hear me when I talk to you?" Claire asked one evening, her frustration bubbling over. Michael glanced up, surprised. "Of course I do," he replied, though his tone lacked conviction. Claire sighed, feeling the loss of the attentive partner she once knew. Her days settled into a predictable routine of packing lunches, grocery shopping, and juggling the kids' schedules. Although she cherished her children, a growing emptiness gnawed at her heart. Deep down, Claire longed to feel valued and understood. She missed the laughter and late-night conversations she and Michael once enjoyed. It was during one of these lonely moments that she found herself wandering into a local bookstore on a rainy afternoon. The aroma of coffee and old books greeted her as she stepped inside, inviting her to linger. As she aimlessly browsed the aisles, she inadvertently bumped into a man in the fiction section. "Sorry about that," she said, feeling embarrassed. "No worries," he replied with a warm smile. "You have good taste, this is my favorite section." His name was Daniel, and their conversation flowed effortlessly, covering favorite authors and the rarity of finding others who cherished the feel of a real book. Over the next few weeks, Claire found herself thinking about Daniel more than she had anticipated. She reassured herself that it was harmless, a simple yet enjoyable connection with someone who shared her interests. When they met again at the bookstore, their rapport deepened. They exchanged phone numbers, promising to share book recommendations. Initially, their conversations remained light, filled with novels and quotes. But as time passed, the dialogue grew more personal. Daniel became a confidant to Claire, someone she could share her struggles with Michael and the loneliness that enveloped her. "I don't know how it got to this point," she confessed in a late-night message. "I feel like I'm living with a stranger." Daniel's responses were always kind and supportive. "You deserve to feel important for the first time in years," he assured her. Claire felt truly heard for the first time in ages. What began as an emotional connection soon escalated into something more. Their coffee meetups while the kids were at school turned into long text exchanges late into the night during Michael's work hours. Claire was aware of the danger in this relationship. Every time her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel, guilt gnawed at her, yet she couldn't bring herself to end it. "He's just a friend," she reminded herself, though she knew she had crossed a line. She took precautions, deleting messages, silencing her phone when Michael was home, and meeting Daniel only in places where they were unlikely to run into acquaintances. But secrets seldom remain hidden, especially when life unfolds unexpectedly. That evening, as Claire and Michael sat down for dinner, she had no inkling that her carefully constructed facade was on the verge of crumbling. Claire moved about the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on dinner. The comforting aroma of roast chicken and rosemary potatoes filled the air, making the space feel warm and inviting. She glanced at the clock. 6:45 p.m. Michael would be home any minute. After spending the afternoon preparing the meal, Claire hoped to mend some of the strain in their marriage and create a sense of normalcy for the evening. When Michael walked through the door, his usual tired expression softened slightly upon seeing the table setting and the warm meal awaiting him. "Wow, this looks amazing," he said, placing his briefcase by the door. Claire smiled, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. "I thought we could have a nice dinner together, no distractions," she suggested, grateful for the moment they were sharing. Michael nodded, taking his seat. I'd like that. As they ate, their conversation remained light and pleasant. Claire admired how well the table looked and felt a glimmer of hope seeing Michael engage with her. She inquired about his day. He provided the usual updates about clients and deadlines, and for a brief moment, Claire allowed herself to feel optimistic, believing they might be turning a corner. However, just as she reached for her glass of wine, her phone buzzed loudly on the counter, shattering the fleeting peace. "Michael, hold on," she said, her heart racing as she recognized the number. It was Daniel. "No, it's probably just a telemarketer," she replied, attempting to keep her tone casual. Michael raised an eyebrow but said nothing as they continued their meal. The phone buzzed again, indicating a voicemail, and Claire's palms grew clammy, a knot tightening in her stomach. "Telemarketers usually don't call twice," Michael pointed out, glancing at the phone. Claire forced a laugh, but it felt hollow. "Persistent, aren't they?" she said, trying to lighten the mood. After dinner, eager to escape Michael's probing gaze, she stood to clear the table. But before she could reach for her phone, Michael picked it up. "Let me see," he said, glancing at the device. Panic surged through Claire. "It's nothing, Michael, I'll deal with it later," she insisted, but he wasn't listening. He noted the missed call and the voicemail notification. "It looks like they left a message," he remarked, his tone light but edged with curiosity. "Michael, really, it's not important," Claire said, her voice sharper than intended. "Why are you being so defensive?" he asked, concern shadowing his features as he tapped the voicemail. Daniel's voice filled the room. "Hey Sele, it's me, Daniel. I've been thinking about you. Call me back when you can." The words hung in the air, cutting through the fragile normalcy Claire had desperately tried to create. Michael's expression hardened as he set the phone back on the counter and turned to face Claire with unnerving calmness. "Who's Daniel?" Claire's mind raced, scrambling for an explanation. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. "He's just a friend," she said, her voice trembling. Michael crossed his arms, his intense gaze locking onto her. "Friends don't leave voicemails like that," he countered, his tone growing sharper. Tears welled in Claire's eyes as she replied, "It's not what you think." Michael's response was swift, filled with sorrow and incredulity. "What did happen, Sela?" he demanded, leaving no room for evasion. "I've been feeling so lonely, Michael," she admitted, her voice breaking. "You're always working, I just needed someone to talk to. And Daniel was there." Michael's voice cut through the air colder than before. "What happened then?" The weight of her lies crashed down around her. She took a deep breath, admitting, "I needed someone to talk to. Daniel is who I chose." "It started out innocent, didn't it?" Michael's voice was low and cold. Claire's voice broke as she replied, "Yes, it did. I swear, it started out innocent." But Michael's tone was skeptical. "When did it stop being innocent?" Claire hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, it just happened. We started talking and I don't know." Michael leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "You expect me to believe this was just an emotional affair?" Claire nodded desperately. "Yes, Michael. I know it was wrong, but I never crossed that line. I couldn't, Michael." She looked down at her hands, trembling. Tears streamed down Claire's face as she said, "I was lonely, Michael. I didn't mean for this to happen." Michael's voice was pained as he asked, "Do you have any idea what this feels like, Claire? To know that my wife, the person I trusted most, has been sharing parts of herself with another man." Silence enveloped the room as Michael stood up, his movements deliberate. "I need some air," he said, grabbing his keys. Claire begged him not to leave, but he was already out the door. The sound of his car faded into the distance, leaving Claire standing alone in the kitchen. As she waited for Michael to return, the minutes dragged into hours. Daniel's taunting voice echoed in her mind, and she couldn't shake the feeling of guilt and shame. The remnants of their dinner lingered on the table, the plates and the half-full wine glass, serving as a painful reminder of what had been a hopeful attempt at reconnecting with her husband. It was nearly midnight when Claire heard the sound of Michael's car pulling into the driveway. Her heart raced as she watched him step inside and walk into the living room. His face was inscrutable as he sat down on the couch. Claire hovered in the doorway, unsure of what to say. Michael's voice was calm yet firm as he said, "Tell me everything." Claire sat down on the edge of the armchair across from him, her hands still shaking. The tension between them was palpable as Michael leaned forward and asked, "When did it stop being innocent?" Claire took a deep breath and admitted, I met Daniel a few months ago at a bookstore. We were just talking about books and life. Michael narrowed his eyes. And when did it stop being innocent? Claire hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know, it just happened. We started texting each other but nothing physical ever occurred. Michael's skepticism was evident as he replied, So, you expect me to believe this was just an emotional affair? You've been so focused on work that I've felt invisible, Claire said, her voice trembling. I tried to tell you, but you never listened. Do you think that justifies what you did? Michael, Claire began, but he interrupted her. Claire, he said, his voice rising in frustration. I made a terrible mistake, and I hate myself for it. But it wasn't because I don't love you. I do. For a long moment, Michael remained silent. Then, to Claire's surprise, he let out a deep sigh and rubbed his hands over his face. I'm angry. You hurt me. You betrayed me. Michael, I'm so sorry, Claire replied, tears brimming in her eyes. I didn't mean to hurt you or our marriage. I just felt so alone. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you fight for us before finding someone else? He pressed, the hurt evident in his voice. I tried, Michael. I really did, but you wouldn't listen. I didn't know how to handle it, she confessed, her voice cracking. I never wanted this. Michael's expression softened, revealing a mix of sadness and regret. I've been so caught up in work that I stopped being your husband. That's on me. Claire blinked, unsure how to respond. What are you saying? I'm saying I've neglected you, he admitted. I need time to process this, to figure out what it means for us. Claire's heart sank. Does that mean you're leaving? No, I'm not leaving, he said firmly. But if we're going to try to fix this, I need two things. First, you need to cut off all contact with Daniel. No more calls, no more texts. I'll block his number right now. Second, we need counseling. We need someone to help us work through this together. Claire nodded, her voice trembling. I'll do whatever it takes, Michael. I just want us back. Though Michael's conditions gave Claire a glimmer of hope, she knew the road ahead would be long and challenging. Little did she realize that their journey to rebuild their marriage would uncover deeper truths that would challenge everything they thought they knew about each other. The morning after their intense conversation, Claire woke up feeling drained. Michael had spent the night in the guest room, leaving the house unnervingly quiet. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, replaying their conversation in her mind. His calm yet cutting words echoed, I need time to process this. When Michael walked into the kitchen, his expression was neutral, but the tension was palpable. Morning, he said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Morning, Michael, Claire replied softly. Did you sleep okay? Not really, he admitted, sitting across from her. We need to talk. Michael set his coffee down and met Claire's gaze. I've been thinking about this all night. I need to be honest about where I stand. Claire braced herself, her heart racing. I'm willing to try to rebuild this marriage, but we both need to commit to fixing what's broken. I'm committed, Claire. I'll do whatever it takes, Michael nodded. Here's what I need from you. First, you need to block Daniel permanently. I don't want you contacting him again. Claire pulled out her phone to show him, and he nodded, satisfied. Good. Second, we start counseling together, and we need to be honest about everything. Agreed, Claire replied, feeling a mix of determination and trepidation. Lastly, Michael continued, his tone softening, we need to find a way to reconnect and rebuild what we've lost. A glimmer of hope sparked within Claire. I want that too, she said, reaching for his hand. A week later, Claire and Michael sat in a cozy office across from their therapist, Dr. Richards, an older woman with a kind smile and a no-nonsense demeanor. Rebuilding trust after betrayal is one of the hardest things a couple can do, she began. But it's not impossible. The first step is understanding why it happened. Michael crossed his arms, looking guarded. I know why I wasn't there for her. I was too focused on work. Dr. Richards turned to Claire. And you? Claire looked down, feeling ashamed. I let my loneliness drive me to make a terrible choice. I should have talked to Michael sooner. I should have fought harder for our marriage. Dr. Richards nodded. It's crucial to acknowledge your roles in what happened, but now we need to focus on moving forward. In the subsequent sessions, Claire and Michael peeled back the layers of their relationship. Michael admitted that his workaholic tendencies stemmed from a fear of failure. "I wanted to provide the best life for our family," he said. "But now I see that I was neglecting what mattered most." Claire opened up about her feelings of isolation. "I didn't know how to express my unhappiness without sounding ungrateful," she said. "I thought if I just waited, things would improve on their own." Through these conversations, they began to understand each other's pain and vulnerabilities. Outside of counseling, Claire and Michael decided to give their relationship another shot. They started having weekly date nights, something they hadn't done in years. Their first outing was a simple dinner at a local restaurant, where they made a conscious decision to avoid discussing work and the affair. "This feels nice," Claire said, smiling shyly across the table. "It does," Michael replied, mirroring her smile. "It's like we're starting over." They began to spend more time together at home, playing board games with their kids and taking evening walks around the neighborhood. Each small moment of connection brought them closer to healing. However, whispers about the affair began to circulate through their social circle. One afternoon, Claire's closest friend, Sarah, confronted her. "I've heard rumors," Sarah said. "Claire, are you and Michael okay?" Claire hesitated but chose to be honest. "We're working through some things," she admitted. "It hasn't been easy, but we're trying." Sarah hugged her tightly. "I'm here for you, no matter what," she reassured her. The support from Sarah and others made Claire feel less isolated as she navigated the challenges. One evening, while clearing the dinner table, Michael approached Claire with his phone in hand. "I got a call from Daniel today," he said. "He didn't sound very friendly." Claire stopped what she was doing, her heart quickening. "What did he say?" "He wanted to apologize. He said he didn't mean to cause trouble, and that he won't contact you again." Doubt crept into Claire's mind. "Do you believe him?" Michael sighed. "I don't know, but what matters is that I trust you to keep your distance. You can trust me." "Michael," Claire said earnestly, "I won't let you down again." Together, they began to rebuild their marriage, discovering a strength they never knew they had. Just when it seemed like things were improving, a shocking revelation surfaced that threatened to undo all their progress. Their lives had started to feel normal again. Weekly counseling sessions brought them closer, and date nights became something they both looked forward to for the first time in years. Claire felt hopeful, glimpsing the man she had once fallen in love with. Michael was more attentive and present than ever. But one evening, just as they started to find their footing, the past resurfaced in an unexpected way. Michael arrived home with a plain white envelope, his expression unreadable as he handed it to Claire. "What is this?" she asked, concern flooding her as she sensed the seriousness in his eyes. "It's from Daniel," he replied flatly. Claire's hands began to tremble. "Why would he send something to you?" "I don't know," Michael admitted, his voice tight. "But we should find out together." Claire hesitated before slowly opening the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. As she unfolded the paper, she began to read aloud. "Claire, I know I promised to stay out of your life, but there's something I need to say. You deserve to hear the truth. The connection we had was real, and I'll always be grateful for the time we shared. But there's something I've kept from you. When we first met, it wasn't by chance. Michael asked me to meet you. He wanted to see if you would stray. I didn't expect to fall for you, Claire, but I did. That's why I'm telling you this now. You deserve honesty, even if it's too late. I'm sorry for everything." It felt as though the ground had been ripped from beneath Claire. She looked up at Michael, her voice trembling. "Is this true? Did you set me up?" Michael's expression went pale, his jaw tightening. "It's not what you think, just let me explain." But Claire's anger bubbled over. "This was a terrible idea," Michael admitted, regret seeping into his voice. "I could see you pulling away, but I didn't know how to handle it. So, I asked Daniel to meet you. I thought if you were tempted, it would show me how serious things had become." Claire stared at him in disbelief. "You thought spying on me would help our marriage? I can't believe you let it go this far." "I never thought you'd actually connect with him," Michael replied, his voice breaking. Claire's fury boiled over. "You let me believe this was all my fault. Did I destroy our marriage?" "I didn't know how to tell you," he admitted, regret washing over his features. "By the time I realized how wrong I was, it was too late." "You tricked me," Claire said, her voice shaking. "You betrayed me just as much as I betrayed you." Michael stepped closer, his hands raised in surrender. "I know I've hurt you, but I swear I never wanted it to end like this. I love you. I've always loved you. Claire turned away, tears streaming down her face. I don't even know who you are anymore, she whispered. Michael's voice trembled with desperation. I'm still the man who wants to fight for this marriage. Please, Claire, don't let this ruin everything we've worked for. Claire needed silence to process the revelation that the man she had trusted most had set the wheels of betrayal in motion that night. Overwhelmed, she packed an overnight bag and left their home, checking into a small hotel on the outskirts of town. She needed time to reflect. Hours slipped by as she replayed the events of the past few months, the emotional affair, the confrontation, the counseling. Had too much damage been done while she was away? Was their marriage worth saving after all? Meanwhile, Michael sat alone in their home, consumed by guilt. He had thought his actions would clarify their relationship, but instead, they only deepened the wounds. In search of guidance, he called Dr. Richards, their therapist. You need to be honest with her, Dr. Richards advised. If there's any hope of rebuilding your marriage, it begins with full accountability. I've told her everything, but words aren't enough anymore, Michael replied. The next morning, Claire returned home to find Michael perched on the porch, his eyes red and weary. I wasn't sure if you'd come back, he murmured. I'm not sure if I'm staying. Michael, I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking for one anyway. I'll do whatever it takes to show you I'm sorry, Claire responded, her tone cautious but earnest. I need to know that you're willing to change, not just for me but for us, Claire insisted, crossing her arms in determination. I am, Michael affirmed firmly. I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you. As they stood at this crossroads, both understood that the journey ahead would be challenging. The decisions they made now would determine whether their love could endure. In the living room, after the devastating revelation of Michael's manipulation, a palpable silence enveloped them. I need time to process all of this, Claire finally said. But if we are moving forward, there are conditions. Michael leaned closer, his expression earnest. What are they? Claire's voice quivered as she replied. We need complete transparency, no more lies, no secrets. If you want me to trust you again, you must be entirely honest. You have my word, he promised. We also need to rebuild our foundation, Claire continued. That means counseling, but also finding ways to communicate and support each other better. We can't revert to the way things were. I agree, Michael said, his voice steady. Claire hesitated, then added, before we go further, I need to see that you're willing to put us first, above work, above pride. Michael's gaze softened. You and the kids have always been my priority. I've just lost sight of how to show it, but I will prove that I can change. Then, with a surprising gesture, he revealed a neatly folded resignation letter from his position at the firm. I'm stepping down, Claire. I've already spoken to my partners. Claire stared, taken aback. Michael, you don't have to do that. I've been working too much and not spending enough time with our family. It's time for that to change, he replied, igniting a flicker of hope within her for the first time in weeks. As their counseling sessions with Dr. Richards progressed, they confronted difficult questions. Why did Michael feel the need to test Claire? Why had she sought emotional support from Daniel? How could they prevent such issues in the future? Trust isn't something that happens overnight, Dr. Richards explained. It's earned through consistent actions over time. Michael listened intently, taking every piece of advice to heart. He started leaving his phone in another room during family time, engaging more actively in conversations, and planning thoughtful gestures to show Claire he cared. Simultaneously, Claire began to open up about her feelings, learning that rebuilding trust required vulnerability, even when it felt daunting. Despite having blocked Daniel's number, Claire was reminded daily that trust takes time and effort to restore. With each session, Michael and Claire grew closer to understanding and healing, one conversation at a time. Michael began leaving his phone in another room during family time, actively engaging in conversations and planning thoughtful gestures to show Claire how much he cared. Claire, in turn, realized that rebuilding trust meant embracing vulnerability, even when it felt daunting. Although she had blocked Daniel's number, his shadow still loomed over their lives. One day Michael confessed, I can't stop thinking about him and what he did to us. Claire gently placed her hand on his. He's gone, Michael. He doesn't have power over us anymore. Those words marked a turning point for them. They started focusing less on the past and more on the future they wanted to build together. gradually rediscovering the connection that had drawn them together in the first place. One evening, Michael surprised Claire with a date at the bookstore where she and Daniel had once spent time together. "I know this place holds complicated memories for you," he said, "but I want to replace them with something better." As they browsed the aisles, he picked up a book he thought she might enjoy. "Remember when we used to talk for hours about stories like this?" he asked. Claire smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I do, I miss that." Their efforts not only strengthened their marriage but also brought their family closer. Michael began spending more time with their children, assisting Emma with her school projects and taking Jake to soccer games. One evening, as they tossed a ball in the backyard, Jake observed, "You're different, Dad." "I like it," Michael replied with a smile. "Thanks, buddy. I'm trying." On their 16th wedding anniversary, Michael planned a surprise for Claire by recreating their wedding day in their backyard, complete with twinkling lights, music, and their closest friends. As Claire walked onto the patio, she gasped in astonishment. "What is this?" she asked, eyes wide. "It's a vow renewal," he said, taking her hands in his. "I want to spend the rest of my life proving how much you mean to me." Tears streamed down Claire's face as Michael recited their vows, promising to prioritize their family and never take her for granted again. Taking a deep breath, Claire echoed her vows. "I promise to trust you, to be honest with you, and to never stop fighting for us." In that moment, they both felt a peace they hadn't known in years. Their journey had been painful, but it had also brought them closer in ways they never expected. They were no longer the same couple who had started this journey. They felt stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever before. "Do you think we'll ever completely forget what happened?" Claire asked softly as they swayed to the music. Michael shook his head. "No, but maybe we're not supposed to. The point is to learn from it and ensure it never happens again." Claire smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "I think I can live with that."